Great. So as Ben was sharing earlier in the call, this interview that we're having tonight is part of a series of conversation with people involved in collaborative and democratic approaches to moving money in service of a just transition. These sessions are part of this discovery process that the TRCC is leading in order to inform the design of an action learning lab for the course of 2021 that will support collaborative funding practices for networks and organizations around the globe. And today we have the pleasure of having Bloom Network as our guest. We will be interviewing Magenta, who's the Business Development and Creative Director for Bloom Network and the Pollination Lab, Meg, who is Bloom's Network Chief Information Officer, and Hannah, who is Bloom's Community Support Lead. So the way this interview we have the structure that we've been using, which are a few questions, which will go on this journey together. And I haven't done it with 3 people, so please feel free to either all answer, or if someone feels called, we'll play it by ear. And then the idea is that we'll open the conversation to perhaps, I was going to say Ben, but I'm feeling that perhaps, yeah, Ben, and then the whole group. So let's just jump in. So the first question is, okay. And I'm finding that my questions are not, I'm gonna need a second because my first question just disappeared from my documents. So, okay, so how could I forget? So the first question is to tell us a short, yeah, because this is like this is really what launches the whole thing. So tell a short story about, a specific experience that you have had related to collaborative or democratic funding, co-funding, that was highly successful or valuable in some way. So perhaps you can take a minute, or if there's a story you want to share together, or if you have each a story that you'd like to share. I would love to hear from you on that. A short story about a specific experience of collaborative or democratic funding that was highly successful or valuable to you. Perhaps we could do one at a time. I can't see on my screen, which makes it very difficult. Oh, now I see. Great. Perhaps if you could unmute yourself too, then I will feel like we're in this together. Great.
I could go first if you'd like.
Thank you, Magenta.
I would have to say our success with collaborative funding would be with other kinds of capital than finance. And that is just the absolute brilliance and robustness of wisdom that has come through our global network. When we first launched, there were around 100 cities that quickly formed, and the people who came forward were connected with many networks and movements in the regions where they were. And just the profundity and depth of experience, like a lot of people who have been doing coalition building for 10, 15 years or something like that, and just learning from each other as a global community has been just like such rich wealth of wisdom and experience that has been just very loving and magical, and so much really deep consent as well, and that's been really beautiful to experience.
So I guess I could add to that, to something that's sort of in process. Hasn't been exactly wildly successful yet because it got sort of clipped in its inception by COVID. But we did get the green light for a project at a local middle school that was in a neighborhood that I lived in for a long time. One of my main interests in Bloom is beautification projects in, underserved areas and things like that, especially places that have a lot of eyes in the commons, right? So this is a school that is a large rectangle. Inside the school are 2 square courtyards that are basically the view that all students and all staff see every day when they walk from class to class. And they are very gray and sad and depressing. And every time I'd walk by, my child went to school there, and I lived in that neighborhood for around 14 years. And so I'd walk by and think, oh, that's such a terrible, gray, sad view for those kids. So I had the idea to have a Bloom project be the beautification of those courtyards. And so I just asked about it and said, hey, what's going on with those courtyards? They're sad. And they were like, yeah, we just wish someone would do something with them. And I was like, I'm here with Bloom. We're going to do something with them. And it turns out that they already have funding for them. Nobody ever just asked or did anything at all about them in all these years and years. And so there's a science teacher who has been sort of keeping them, going for a few years. And I'm going to work with him and make sure that all of his sort of wildest dreams come true in the space, on top of things maybe he didn't imagine, but I have this vision. So this school is really, it's an inner city school in a city of 120,000 people. So not exactly, like deep LA or anything, but it is a city, and it's the most diverse and urban population in the city, which is one of the reasons why I wanted my child to go there, to get that kind of life experience. It's really valuable. And so, but because of the intense diversity and the low student to staff ratio, they can't hang around. Like, there's no place that the students are allowed to just be. They have to keep moving. So like when they get there in the morning at school, they have to keep walking, right? Because they're not allowed to hang around, because any kind of hangout leads to some sort of violence that they then have to quell. So I think a lot of middle schools especially have utilized this sort of keep them moving. And part of their walk in the morning that they're allowed to go through is this courtyard. And so part of my plan is to have part of the courtyard, one of them, be a little stage that fits a cello and a violin. And so I'm going to partner with Blues in the Schools, which is a local musical program that pairs schools up with famous jazz musicians and blues musicians. And so I have this vision of this courtyard and this beautiful painting and this sculpture that's going to happen there. And then this cello and violin song that will play on this first day of these kids walking through this, what used to be this gray, terrible place. And anyway, the point is that you can take responsibility for something in your community and just ask a simple question and make it beautiful. So,
what school is that in LA?
No, I said it's not like an inner city school in LA. It's in Columbia, Missouri. It's west,
I see. Okay.
West Middle, in a city of 120,000. But it's definitely the innermost city school that we have and the least funded. So anyway, that's something that is ahead, but COVID, we've got the designs going, have sort of mapped the area and taken the photos of, the space, drawn it to scale, have this idea to dream and vision with the students, and COVID, sort of interrupted. But anyway, that's a long enough story.
And I'll just throw in a short story that's not actually related to Bloom, but something that happened here in Whangarei for a couple of years. It was called the Awesome Foundation. I don't think it's unique to here. You may have heard of it before, but basically 10 people put in $100 every second month. And those 10 people, then they ask for submissions on like short projects that can be used, that can use $1,000. And then those 10 people choose which project they're going to support that 2-month period, and then the money goes into that project. So it's really short, snappy, democrative and collaborative co-funding model that worked really well here for a few years.
Beautiful. I really appreciate how each one of your stories were very different, and but all about this collaborative funding, where the capital, as you said, Magenta, can be any form of capital. And I, with the from these stories, I would like to know if you could pick out key elements, whether it was values or resources or assets, and some of you have already mentioned, that contributed to the experience being so valuable. And Hannah, I noticed perhaps if you have a story that's, I think what's interesting is something that's very personal per se, or if, yeah, so if you would like to update the story, or just thinking of capital more broadly, as you were saying, Magenta, if there are key elements, whether they were values or resources or assets that made it so that it was successful, whether it was bringing so many networks together. Or...
I think one of the key assets in my town is that we're about 70,000 people. So we're still very small and very connected. So when you have 10 people put up their hands to donate money, and then they're asking submissions from the community around what projects they can give to that, because our community asset really is that connectivity. It's really easy to then kind of spiral that funding and love back out into the community. And that kind of thing pops up here all the time. We just recently had our first Fringe Festival, for example, where all the arts community got together and on a lot of volunteer basis put together a 2-week festival of all the different arts and collaborative awesome stuff that goes on in this town. And so one of our main assets, I think, is that connectivity that we have, particularly within the arts and social community, like social development community. And I actually fear our city getting bigger because I don't really want to lose that,
So I just wanted to add to that just a source of perhaps untapped funding that I think a lot of people haven't thought about. I work for a global cloud computing company. And so we deploy global software implementations like Google and things like that. And so Google Cloud Platform, which includes artificial intelligence, machine learning, data lakes, things like that, Kubernetes, which is a new way to build software and containers, but also with the Google Workspace, formerly known as G Suite, in implementing those softwares. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that my organization has a huge range of skills that can be used, and our company gives us an 8-hour community service day every year that each of us is free to do. And I'd be willing to bet 60 to 80% of the workers in my organization don't use theirs at all. And so I use mine each year for Bloom. But that's just an idea to think about is, do you have a corporation or organization near you that can potentially have this? Because I'm always looking for things that we can use for Bloom eventually to have questions for artificial intelligence modeling and mathematical learning models and things like that. So just an idea to get your minds working, because I think that's a resource that most people haven't thought about or tapped into.
I think asset-wise across Bloom network, the most profound thing has been like creating relationships with each other that are heart-centered and very physically connected in our local communities, but also as an international community. When we start our calls, we always it's hard to describe how we do it, but very physically connect with each other, even though we're all across the world. And we'll do like a meditation to drop into just a very quiet but shared place of awareness. And that has allowed for just a higher bandwidth of communication and understanding and clarity when we do come together. So if a community is bringing people together across different kinds of difference, whether it's different kinds of learning, different kinds of backgrounds, different kinds of like professional contexts. That just really goes a really long way to kind of leapfrog across some of the tensions, or kind of help folks center in a place of stillness where they're really in the shared presence of people coming from different perspectives, so that kind of a dominating dynamic doesn't end up like by default sort of disrupting the capacity that a network could have. So I don't know if that was a helpful thing at all, but as we try to build, collaborative funding connectivity, this class dynamics, for example, can be really rocky with folks, and making spaces where you encourage people to drop in, spiritually, physically, and even just like simply a place of silence can often go a long way in helping people feel comfortable with each other, so that they can be honest and share where they would like to connect and travel to together.
Thank you. So
Hey,
our
I
next,
wanted to,
Magenta. Oh, you're listening. So I will continue, just because of the sake of the structure is for us to go through these 4 first questions initially to set the space, and then we'll open it. So the next question is, if you had 3 wishes in order to support the success of Bloom's co-funding and collaborative network work or network-based initiatives, what would those 3 wishes be? 3 wishes that you could get now?
I'll start. One is that we set up our DAO quickly. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and it's really the community where we're finding the most resonance, where they already understand what we're doing because it's very decentralized, and a lot of institutional funders like fundamentally don't understand what we are as an organization, but that community has really shared values and everything, and it's yeah, I think it's just a really good bridge to alternative financial structures that make more sense for these kind of like decentralized, multi-organizational collaborative things that need to happen. So yeah, that, and that we have more help land soon. Like, we're growing really fast and still haven't like landed the financial capacity or as much kind of volunteer support. So it's like, I'm 10 years into working that way, and I'm just like breaking at this point, just because there's like 500 people coming to me as the connection point, because we haven't been able to build like that next layer of our infrastructure. So I know that will happen, but it's a wish that that happens like quickly. And other than that, just like, I guess the wish is joy and trust. There's a lot more interest from people who hold financial power, I think, in suddenly understanding, oh, we need to support these kinds of like diverse and decentralized and community-led initiatives that have been invisible for a while. So suddenly, like, people are finding the kinds of networks we're all involved with and stuff. So I know often there's a learning curve there and everything, but just I hope those relationships build in a good way and a kind way for everyone, because I know we're all under a lot of stress right now too.
If we all go, does that mean we have 9 wishes instead, or shall?
You can also just have, if you have 1 wishes, if you have less than 3, that's totally fine.
I think that last point that Magenta said around just getting more people on board, and particularly financial people who believe and understand in decentralized ways of working and believes in the project of what Bloom is. And I think that's definitely our biggest wish.
Yeah, I
I'll
would
just
say
stick with that one.
Me too. Same as the other folks, but funding for long-term staff to sort of expand the operations, and also I'm interested in funding to help assist with developing our governance model, because that's of interest to Bloom Network. These sort of what's the word I'm trying to say? We're inspired by the indigenous populations in the areas, and also usually led by somebody who is deeply embedded in the arts and culture of their organizations. So I guess I would just love to, see funding for governance so that the Bloom hubs can take over some of the potential places where government isn't caring for people and loving them and caring for their well-being.
Thank you. So this is the fun moment where we're going to travel in time, and we're at the end of 2021. And you've participated in this co-funding learning lab along with peers. And through that journey, you're seeing the people with, there's just all these wishes are coming true and in an accelerated way. And you're really seeing that the governance model is really being developed, that the people with the power and influence and money are seeing the vision and investing, and that the help is coming, and that the DAO is working and iterating. And so perhaps take a minute to close your eyes and really feel into that place where that is the case. And really visualize who are the people alongside you in that cohort, the organization, the people, the individuals that have supported that journey, and you've supported each other and learned along the way, what you learned along the way, the capacity building that has happened, the fundraising. So what you were able to give in the lab and receive, the challenges that were overcome, problem solved, and the surprises that you experienced. And from that future point, you can tell me and tell us, all of us, in the past tense, as if it has all happened. I would love to hear from that future point, your experience, and what made it so successful, and who were those cohort members in strong position. And
so I think I'll speak to that simply because Bloom was it was the same network, but had another name in an earlier iteration. And we sort of have this cliffhanger moment that is ahead of us, but I guess in this stream, it's behind us now because it all went so beautifully. But it's, I'm not sure if we're exactly calling it this yet, but it's the call to Bloom. So in a previous incarnation, there was a call out for what they called evolutionaries, people who are into alternative science and health and all these different wellness and governance, different areas to build a network and come together. And so there was a pretty immediate response of 250 cities that responded, which of course immediately overwhelmed the people who put that call out. They were like, whoa, we just want a few people to party. And we were like, but we're here, right? And so we took a decade to think carefully, and like Magenta said, create these kind of heart-centered relationships of trust, because that's one of the big lessons that we'll learn, is that communities aren't built overnight. Community takes time and trust and mistakes and problems and conflict. and getting through those things. And the call to bloom in the future, in my opinion, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 cities or bioregions respond, and we're again overwhelmed in a great way, but we have staff all over the world to intake those hubs of what we hope will become permanent hubs of regenerative culture in every continent, and that they will take hold and bloom eternally in their cities and their areas.
I'm really happy at the end of 2021 that we've been able to find meaningful representation and working alongside tangata whenua, so that's Māori people in New Zealand, and ways to integrate their Indigenous knowledge about the natural world and integrate that with regenerative culture, bringing people away from hardship, from gangs and violence, and working together to create a beautiful Titai Tokerau. That's the north part of the North Island where I live, and yeah, walking together in that regenerative journey. Very happy that we got there. Yes, well, take a few more years, I'm sure, but we're on the right path.
The two things I see, one is Bloom's like multi-DAO federated cooperative structure is like flourishing, and we're kind of acting as a bridge with real world communities, helping folks connect with the finance tools that are appropriate to their context, and help people kind of bridge things from mass migration to country scale currency collapses and stuff. And we've managed to get enough in front of those things with the financial and governance infrastructure that communities are able to like lean into. I would say us, but it's like a collaborative, interconnected network of folks who have been seeing these things coming and building. And now that we've found each other more and have formalized our ability to trade with and support one another in symbiotic ways, it's that fluid of that structure is flowing in a good way, and in a mutually consensual way, to help push back threats from environmental or political destruction and all kinds of stuff. I see really cool incubation stuff happening, so that it's quicker for people making regenerative initiatives or coalitions and stuff to go, like the bootstrapping phase is shorter, where they're having to like struggle pretty hard. Like, I have this vision, I know this is going to help, but there's much more community peer-to-peer infrastructure in place to support that. And for us to be like fully nourished and have the different kinds of support that we need to be well while we kind of hold those leadership roles. And then lastly, I see Bloom Network as a kind of like a marketing hacking agency. There's like one element of what we're doing where we're sharing like really cool art and music from diverse communities all over the world who are sharing like really true creative visionary messages of like kindness and interconnection and pulling colonization off of our backs and emerging from that in good ways, and just having a parallel infrastructure to the like gross extractive and exploitative media marketing like technology complex that is being so gamed right now by the kind of sick financial and corporate, just the way that those structures have evolved. And so the parallel systems are really thriving, the kind of life juices of them are flowing, and our planet is starting to kind of reharmonize in those yeah, with that love force.
So lastly, thank you all for sharing that dream. And before we open, if there are key actions that you took during that lab that made that that really made that dream come true or become a reality, that come to mind.
And one of the things is to continue to convene collaborative calls that are structured in innovation lab kind of things, so that we come together to solve a problem and have ongoing rhythms for checking in with each other to follow through and build that. And it's done in a very community oriented way, where we are able to continue calling in support from whatever it is needed to like functionally achieve that. And so that kind of practical, almost like project management structure is like a really good backbone for things flowing. And sympathetically with that, good containers for like the deeper conversations that do need to happen, because it's like there's some deep stuff that is still being unpacked. So the like synergy of that like ability to move really quickly, but also the container to fully be present with each other.
I think working through language and colonization and all that kind of those kind of things is really important as part of this discussion too.
I agree. And I was going to say, I think having a certainty of your own vision, and I think being inspired by Indigenous communities all over the world, it helps us stay aligned in our vision, because Indigenous communities in a lot of places were aligned in their vision for conservation and caring for the watersheds. And so we really try to keep those Indigenous values front and center, I think, in our minds and our hearts. And so finding people that also share that unity of vision is important, because there's not a lot of conflict once you get to a certain place of purpose. And of course, there's always going to be differences in culture and opinion and country and all of those things. But if you really share that deep global unity of vision, then we've just found that we've gotten to that place where that's what we attract. You know, early on, there was a lot more difficulty and personalities, and you know, over time, we evolved.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to invite Ben to join.
Thank you so much, the three of you, and Dunya for holding the space. Yeah, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because we have such a lovely large group of people here, and the plan is after this, I think, Dunya, we should move into breakout groups, and we'll split up the four of you into 4 different groups, and that'll allow for a little bit more kind of direct dialogue and inquiry and more voices to be heard, and we can come back at the end for a bit of sharing from that. I'll just say, you know, I'm really excited, you know, having watched your work with Bloom Magenta now for what, 5-6 years or so, and heard the story and you know, the struggle and the challenge. It's really exciting to see how it's how you've hung in there and how it's growing and developing. And I was really struck by the naming of the core, the simple reality of people knowing each other because they've made mistakes together and they've had conflict and they've done stuff, even small things, but just building of those relationships and the web and the network of those, that's really the heart of what, you know, where we're seeing that there's value to work with. And this idea of doing some kind of a lab next year to fund a cohort of people to really increase their capacity to move resources of all kinds, but we're particularly interested in money in collaborative ways. That the heart of that is that these networks of trusted relationships exist, and they're this incredible asset. And you've told us stories of how that works, and you know, our theory is that those networks, when they're of the quality of this one, can, you know, are ready or are very close to being ready. And maybe that's part of the lab, you know, is to be able to really call out to the world, you know, and say, hey, we've got 1,000 projects like this courtyard, you know, and you know, this isn't something where we're starting from scratch, or you know, you have to worry. The trust is built into the network already. And so funders and supporters of this, they don't have to come from that place of trust. They have to just understand the history and the value of what you've created. So I think you're really, you know, you're just sharing the essence of that. And you know, Bloom is unique, of course, but there are also many other similar stories, I think, each with their own kind of ecosystem and terrain and context, but all tied to this vision of a just transition, and ready to be served in this way. So I feel like, you know, our goal is really validated, and I hope we get to support your work in the coming year. I'll add one more thing in terms of governance, since you mentioned particularly tomorrow. Our next interview is with Circle Forward, that specializes in using sociocracy as a governance structure for networks. And we are recording them too, but sounds like they're doing some really exciting work that might be great for you to learn about too, if you haven't already encountered them. I'm kind of thinking we move into breakouts, unless there's, you know, and then we'll come back for a little bit of sharing and give you each a time to kind of reflect some more at the end, unless there's something you want to say. Or Dunya, I mean, you should reflect too. You've been holding the space and listening, but I'm curious what landed for you in this.
Wow. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I started the call very anxious because there were so many people, and I was a bit, and then I just went really deep, and so I'm really grateful for that, and I thank all of you very much, because I see the dream that we're co-dreaming, that I really felt that the resonance of what you were sharing, and that I'm hearing threads in all these interviews, and that it's really, there's a sense of it's really this really big thing, and so just feeling that, and appreciation also for that, Meg, you naming the actually, perhaps it was Magenta naming the quick work, the project management, the kind of agile and things that happen quickly together, and having those spaces for that to happen, and also having the space for the really deep work. So that is something that really resonates. So I'm excited to see how the design is gonna come out, and I'm excited for the breakout rooms, actually. Ben, are you?
Right now, so we'll go into these. Yeah, I'll divide up the four of you. Well, let's see. We'll just do 4 rooms, and we'll keep one group here in the main room.
Hannah would like to do three groups.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused as to what you mean by 4 groups.
Oh, I was including Dunya.
Me, Meg.
We'll just
right.
With the numbers that we have, let's just do 3 groups.
I would like that. Yeah.
Okay. So and I need to move. Let's see, magenta there. That's okay. I just need to spread these people around.
Perhaps if any one of you want to use if there is something that's coming up also.
Oh my God, leave me alone.
We're just about ready. We can just sit for a moment, a little quiet. It's good. Just let it all sink in. All right, we're good to go. Why don't we give this, what do you think, 20? Let's go with, like, I don't know, 18 minutes. So you'll get a 1-minute warning. And then we'll come back here and just have time for a little bit of sharing together after that to close out our time. Yeah, here we go. Some of you are staying here with me. Looks like Hannah, Mark, Natalie, Patty, Tanya.